Hello and welcome to art class with Zoe. Today we're going to be painting a pen and wash painting of this cottage in a lavender field. We're going to be looking at how to keep the paint loose and how the pen creates a structure within the painting. I've actually sketched out this little cottage very simply with a pencil first of all, and we're just going to start at the top first and paint a very simple sky. The reason why I'm keeping it simple is because all of the focus is going to be down here, so we don't want the sky taking away from the focal point, which is the cottage. I've wetted the sky and I'm using cerulean blue, starting at the top with a big brush. This is the number 18. Cleaning the brush and then overlapping it, keeping going down to the hillside. And if you want to, you can actually go over the background mountains. You can also move it around a bit. Can you see that I'm moving it forwards and backwards to help the wash a little bit? And then you're just going to leave it dry. While you're leaving it dry, then you can mix up some other colors and prepare. So now that the sky is dry, I'm just going to take some cobalt with a little mix of cerulean in it as well. And I'm just going to paint in dry brush the distant mountains. And you can make this mountain, the middle mountain, the closest one to you, sorry, a little bit more, with a little bit more texture in it. If that's too much, you can soften the brush and soften some of those lines. And then we're going to mix the greens. For the darker green here, and there's a lighter yellow green here as well. Now we're coming to the trees, the background trees and hedgerows. And I'm just using practically a neat lemon yellow. You can put a tiny touch of cerulean if you want. And then I'm using a dry brush on the side of the brush just to dab this on. So this is where the sun is hitting here. And then you can see it's a little bit more shadowy underneath. So you can mix some of the lemon yellow with cobalt. Make sure it's thick enough. And you can just touch a little bit here on the bottom and just let it flow in. I'm keeping this quite loose because of the pen on top. So this is a darker, more of a fir, sort of fir tree. I don't know what the tree is, sorry. But I want it slightly different. So we're going to make a lighter, sort of mix the cadmium yellow with a cobalt. Make a more of an olivey green. And actually leave some of the white in it, so you can put it in dry brush, dot it in, and then what you want to do is mix a darker green, and if you want to make it really dark, you can mix a little tiny bit of red with it, red being the complementary color of green. So when you put a tiny bit of red into a dark green, sorry, a lighter green, you'll get a dark green. We'll mix it up quite nicely. And then taking it, you can just not put it all around the roof, but just a little touch, just to give it that framework around the roof. You can use this as an inkwell. You can bring this up here to give it some more shape. Just make sure you leave the highlights of the light coming through. And the shape of the trees. And then take some lemon yellow, dry brush, clean the brush, quite small, and just bring that down. And the reason why I want to keep this yellow and bright is, one is because it captures the character, and two, yellow is the complementary colour of purple. And of course, you've got purple down here. So you can catch some of that if you want and bring that down, which looks quite nice. But you don't have to cover it all. You can keep some of the paper light and white, and that's actually what I would do, like that. And if you wanted to add a little tiny bits of green here and there, you can just splodge in some bits of green, but just around the house, just to frame it. And then I would leave it dry. I really wouldn't do too much and everywhere. Next, we're going to go on to the cottage, and I'm just going to very lightly do a wash of raw sienna, artist quality, with a dry brush. And I'm just going to put little dabbing strokes so it gives the effect of brickwork. I'm not going to do anything on the roof as yet. And don't forget, don't leave space for shadows, because the shadows will be going over it afterwards. And shadow goes over. One of the biggest mistakes students make, my students, is leaving space for shadows and painting it as like a solid object when it's actually not. Imagine some tissue going over. And then you're just going to take a small brush with burnt sienna. Doesn't matter if it's they're broken lines or broken or sort of thick or thin, because you want to have that sort of rickety, give it that sort of cottagey, old cottagey look, rather it's not a modern building, is it? And then you're going to do little like corrugated edge. And then we're going to mix some red with cobalt. To make a bright purple. And go on. There are many ways to do lavender. Different styles. You can take a small brush and use the sides of the brush with dry brush. Make sure that you keep the light coming through. As this is going away into the distance, you want the thicker rows of lavender here and thinner down here. So you're giving a sense of aerial perspective. I'm leaving lines in between. I'm going to put some grasses in between that as well. You can actually start to use bigger brushes, so you can use a little brush down here and then you can go onto bigger brushes. Or you can use a sponge, just like this, which is also quite nice. Make sure you don't get any red in it, so you don't have some new species of lavender, I'm thinking. I like the direction, but I'm not sure about this red. Oh my goodness. Actually, maybe we should just leave the red in. It'll be fine. So what you need to do is make sure that you don't have any, make sure it's mixed thoroughly, because I caught the red. Can you see? I caught the red here. Take a corner of the sponge. And just dab it on. Like that. And then you want to mix some greenery. I'm going to use a little bit of raw sienna. just put this in between, not actually take it all down. I actually quite like this the way it is, so I might just actually leave it like that. And then we're going to wait for this to dry and start adding the pen wash. Before I start with the pen, I'm just going to very loosely go over the shadow areas. Now I know that this is darker and you could in fact use a purple if you wanted, but I'm going to go for something a little bit warmer, which is a burnt sienna, using the same sort of dabbing motion so you can get a sense of the brickwork. I think I'm just going to leave it like that. Just put a little bit more under here. And then I'm going to let that dry and we're going to go at it with some pen. Next up, we're going to be putting in the windows. I'm using the same purple and a little bit of shadow, bearing in mind that we are actually mainly going to be doing this with pen. But by doing this, putting in the purple, you're just actually giving it a little bit of depth. I'm putting a little bit of the shadow underneath here. And then I'm going to use a bigger brush and a very light wash of purple just to go over that. You see how I'm leaving it quite splodgy? I'm bringing that out there. And then I think we're nearly ready for the pen. Now we come on to pen, and I've got a variety of pens, and this is from the Derwent Line Maker, and they've got a range of different thicknesses from 0.05 and then up to 0.8. And so you have got an option. Either you can use one pen, and I would either go for a middle grade, say the 0.5, or what you can do is make thinner lines in the background. So go for a thinner pen, which is what we're going to do today. And I'm going to go for the 0.1, and then I'm going to go for the 0.5 for the middle, and going to go for 0.8 for the foreground. So don't forget, you know, when you're buying something, you can make a pen line thicker by going over it, but you can't make it thinner, so to speak. So for the mountains, I'm just going to go using my thinnest pen. Well, not the thinnest pen, the 0.1. And then so we're going to start at the top and work down. And also what we're going to do is put some foliage marks in it. So random foliage marks here. So we're not going to do straight line. There are also loads of different ways of actually drawing with pen, different styles. So you can either do it like mine, which is very scratchy, or you can make the lines thicker as well. But just be careful of where you want to put the lines, and, you know, as I said, thinner to thicker, or basically sometimes if you just want to focus on the focal point, you can just put ink here, but you will have to put a little bit of ink surrounding it as well, and you could just leave the mountains behind if you want. I'm also just going to look at different marks as well. So you've got a broken straight line here on the mountains, and then I've got squiggly lines, sort of rounded lines for these type of leaves. These are sort of going more upwards, so I'm just going to make these a little bit more different. So these are middle spike here, kind of going up. And also look at the shadow. So you don't need to put these over the lighter areas. You can just go into the darker areas. And also you can start outlining the roof. And you can put in little bits of detail. So there's a sort of a line across here. Don't go over the line of the roof. You can sort of use that to measure it out. And don't forget, you can always go back into things, but you can't take pen out. So be very careful about how you do that. I'm going to swap now into the 0.5 for the cottage. And I might go up to the 0.8, but I think to start with a 0.5 first. And I would do broken lines. Don't worry about making them too heavy. And you want this sort of corrugated roof. So for example, you can put this door here, and you can start to put in the shadow on the side. I would go with the windows first. And maybe make it a little bit thicker on the right for each one, so it kind of gives them a bit of a dimension. And it's kind of going over the purple, so you've got that extra shadow. So that's coming out. You can see how it's coming out nicely already. If you like a bit of the painting, you don't have to go over it with pen. But I do love pens, so. And then exactly the same as we did with the broken brush strokes, we're going to just bring that down here in the same angle. I'm going to have a little bit of that piping along the top. And then we're going to have a little bit of brickwork. I would not go all over this, by the way. You don't need it. You're just giving it like a little hint of what's there. I'm noticing some shadows that I should have put in, and that's the beauty of this. You can actually just go over it, because it's, once the pen, don't go over that. Sometimes a pen can be quite inky, especially if it's the thicker one. And so if you go over it, even if it says it's waterproof, if you go over it, it will, you know, it will smudge. So just be careful, say for with the 0.8, but I mean, you do have to do that immediately afterwards. So I wouldn't. So, and notice how the green has seeped over here on the side, but it doesn't matter because I've been able to put the line down to bring that shape in. I've left out this greenery here. I could put some of it in. And 1 to 2. Have it growing up the walls. And you want some wooden slats coming down here. And last but not least, you just want a little bit of brickwork here. I think this is actually still wet, so I'm going to have to wait for that. I've left out this, I don't know what this is here, sort of foreground, but you can actually, instead of putting in what you don't know, you can put some grasses in here as well. But you don't want to do too much, otherwise you're going to, you know, take away from the focal point. And then what you want to do is you can either leave the lavender as it is, or you can use 0.8 here and put some grasses on. Or stems, whatever. And you want smaller lines here, so going into the distance, and bigger, longer lines here. But go with the flow. I hope you enjoyed painting a cottage in a lavender field using pen and watercolour, and try it out yourselves.